Peace and blessings, family. This is Brother Mike X. Welcome to another clip from my YouTube channel, Brother Mike X Speaks. You know, before I start tonight, I want to ask you to do me a favor. I would like for you to connect with me on Instagram at Brother Mike X. That's BRUTHAMIKEX. I also would ask you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Brother Mike X Speaks, BRUTHAMIKEX. And take advantage of not just my videos, but I've been working on compiling some playlists, that will run the gamut from, just different subjects, man. There's too many for me to count right now. But there are a host of, beloved family members who are taking advantage of social media to put forward content, videos, discussions, documentaries, and other things to help edify the family, to help turn the light on so that we don't have to continue to grope around in spiritual darkness, to grope around in, self-hatred, to grope around subject to political corruption, what I mean, and economic exploitation. There's a host of family members, man, that have been striving to use YouTube, man, to be responsible journalists, to just share, love, to share hope, with whoever is willing to take the time to take advantage of it, man. And, and I am, one of those individuals. So, I ask you to take advantage of, connecting with me in those ways and sharing, whatever you might find relevant, man, so, we need to take advantage of this moment, family, because this is what has been happening. Right now, we are in the midst of another wake-up period. You know what I mean? But what has been happening is we've had other wake-up periods, where the same way that the responsible family members that I was just talking about are striving to use this moment, to contribute to the awakening of the human family, to seek positivity, to seek love, to seek knowledge, wisdom, understanding, truth, to seek consciousness, to seek ownership, over our lives and responsibility over our lives so that we can bring forth the beloved kingdom, man, communities that are prosperous, that are thriving, that are not ghettos, that are not subject to, again, drugs, and addiction and violence, what I mean, and ignorance, and self-hatred and violence, but communities, where we commune with one another, where we seek a common unity, that's a play on that word, community, family, instead of us just being neighbors, who have no relevant and supportive connection with one another. This is another one of those moments, and I'm like, in my mid-40s, you know what I mean? And I was born, and at the time that I was born, I had just missed, the wake-up period known as the Civil Rights Black Power era. I was born on the cusp of that, 1969. And so as I grew up, I went through a period of darkness, where they had killed our leadership, exiled our leadership, imprisoned our leadership. I grew up in a time where there was what you can call a white backlash that wanted to undo, the steps forward, for lack of a better way of putting it, that we had made during the Civil Rights Black Power era. So I was raised in that dark period, where there was this white backlash. We gonna knock those niggas back into their place. You know what I mean? And that continued through the 70s. It continued into the 80s. you know, and towards the mid to late 80s, man, you know, those of you who may have followed me through my YouTube channel, you know, there was a wake up period that was ushered in by the art form called hip hop, you know, the Rakim Allahs, the KRS-Ones, the Brand Nubians, the Public Enemies, and so forth, you know, and that's where I got my wake up, you know, so that I can extricate myself from self-hatred, you know, and ignorance, you know, and believing that the black man's his calling, man, is to be a corner dweller, to stand on the corner night after night, drinking 40s and smoking weed, man. You know what I mean? And that's the best that a black man could aspire to. You know, in the 90s, you know, the late 80s and the 90s was the last great wake-up period that we experienced in this country. You know, where we saw, you know, black men and black women letting go of the nigger word, letting go of the word bitch, you know, and the word minority, and striving to be responsible, you know, for their own thought process, you know, their habits, their customs, you know, and wanted to improve themselves and improve the communities that they lived in. And that wake-up process basically lasted from the late 80s all through the 90s, and began to, you know, flicker out, you know, as the new millennium, the year 2000 came in. You know, for those of you who lived through that time, you know, the Million Man March was kind of like the apex of that wake up, you know, when almost 2 million men converged on Washington, D.C., you know, and everybody that came wasn't Muslim, you know, everybody that went wasn't, you know, down with the Nation of Gods and Earths. You know, they wasn't down with a particular culture, a particular spiritual point of view. It was just, you know, people who wanted more, you know, for themselves and for their family, you know. And then there was an insect crawling on my screen. You know, the Million Woman March, you know. Oh, you know, in 1996, Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam went to the United Nations here in New York City, and had, you know, what was called the World's Day of Atonement. No, I'm wrong on that. Wow, I just misquoted. I got to get that information back. But anyway, they went to the United Nations here in New York City, and in 1997, you had the Million Women's March, you know, in Philadelphia. And, you know, there was, you know, I think the Million Woman March, as far as attracting, you know, both brothers and sisters, you know, who wanted to continue the energy of the wake up, you know, the call to responsibility amongst the black family. There was just as many people at the Million Women's March as was at the Million Man March, you know. And then in 1998, 99 and 2000, you had the Million Youth March, you know, here in New York City, brought forth by Dr. Khalid Muhammad, you know. And I would say again, you know, by the time the new millennium came in, you know, that energy was kind of like dissipating, you know. And as the new millennium came in, you know, the level of consciousness, as far as I could see, it kind of, you know, it dematerialized, you know. And, you know, we went through the first 10 years or so, you know, of the new millennium. And we really didn't have, you know, too much of kind of like a radical voice. I know that Barack Obama was elected in 2008, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily, you know, a community, you know, rooted activity that brought a whole lot of change to the community. Anyway, family, I talked about that longer than I wanted to. In 2016, you know, we see another wake-up period, you know. And this wake-up period, you know, quite honestly, for some, you know, even though there's been those of us like myself who have been awakened, you know, for, a long period of time. You know, my awakening came back in like 1991 is really when I accepted my responsibility as a black man to strive to contribute to the need for community activism, you know, for local efforts, you know what I mean, to connect with the local social, political, economic needs, you know, of the community that I live in, you know, to strive to make some positive things happen. You know what I mean? You know, but now we're in the midst of another wake-up call, you know, and, you know, it has been sparked by, you know, a lot of the police brutality, you know, the whole stand your ground, the killing of black men, young black men and young black women, you know, particularly, and the injustice, you know, of police officers and others who have largely gotten away with murder. You know, that has been directly consequential in bringing forth this latest wake-up call. And the problem is that we cannot continue to go through these wake-up calls followed by periods of darkness, because those periods of darkness have sentenced, you know, hundreds of thousands, you know, of people, you know, to have lives that were rooted in that darkness, you know, to where in that darkness they took on or have taken on habits, beliefs, customs that are anti, you know, the perpetuation and empowerment of themselves. You know, so this is why it's so important that in this latest wake-up call, more so than it being a reactionary wake-up call, you know, against, you know, police brutality, you know, against racism and white supremacy and white skin privilege, you know, against political corruption, against economic exploitation, more so than it being a wake-up call against all of those things. It has to become a wake-up call for ourselves, you know, for self-love, you know, for healing, you know, for the regeneration of the black family and the black neighborhoods, the black village. You know, the wake-up call that we're experiencing now is one that we can ill afford to have it dissipate, you know, again, you know. So this is why it's so important for us to concentrate on keeping the wake-up call in full effect and contributing to the wake-up call with our own contributions, you know what I mean, of becoming responsible, of seeking knowledge, seeking wisdom, seeking understanding and truth, you know, giving our lives, you know, our old lives, you know, where some of us have remained ignorant, you know, purposefully, you know, by choice, you know, where some of us have stood on the sidelines, you know, and we saw the past efforts. We saw the Million Man March and didn't get involved. You know, we saw the Million Youth March and didn't get involved. Like, we saw the efforts of, you know, national leadership, you know what I mean? As well as local leadership, you know, brothers and sisters striving to get involved, man, you know, to be more responsible in regards to bringing some type of peace, you know, some type of uplift, you know, to the communities. And a lot of us haven't got involved, you know, and we can't afford to let that happen this time, you know. So it's not just on me, man, you know, it's not just on, you know, the other people who are out there seeking to tell the truth and seeking to motivate the family, man. It's also on you. What role are you going to play in the midst? Are you going to hold on to, you know, not speaking to everybody, but, you know, those people who, you know, if if this is hitting you, man, if it don't apply, let it fly. But if it does apply, yo, family, we need you. You know what I mean? We need you. Need you to do what? To do the knowledge, you know, to let go of a life of non-consequence, you know, and to get in where you fit in, You know, not necessarily to say where, you know, you got to do what I'm doing, you know what I mean? Or what other people are doing, you know, but in the, you know, it could be in the privacy of your own home. You know, every one of us has power. Every one of us has a circle of friends, a circle of loved ones and neighbors, people who care about us, people who we influence and who we impact. You know, we got to be responsible on how we use that influence. What are you going to highlight? You know, what are you going to empower, you know, through your thought process, you know, through the identity that you have carved out for yourself? You know, is it going to be ratchet conversations, you know, slander, you know what I mean? You know, is it going to be ignorance, you know, that you push into the community and into the lives of other people that you can have influence over? Or is it going to be consciousness, you know, responsibility, you know, a life that is lived in the light of truth, you know what I mean, and love, you know, to where you can add on to the influence, you know, of other people, you know, who are out there striving to present, you know, the truth, you know, as they see it, to help the community to become empowered again, you know, to where some of the people that you know, they might not be necessarily feeling Brother Mike X, you know what I mean? But they're feeling you, you know, and through you utilizing, you know, this humble effort, you know, to strive to add value to our people and to the community, you know, you can take the messages that you hear, you know, and you can begin to, you know, break it down, you know, with your children, you know, with your brothers and sisters, you know, with your loved ones, with your family, you know, with your coworkers and others, you know, and that job is just as important or even more important in some ways, you know, where you can get the light of truth into some of the nooks and crannies, you know, where the light of truth needs to be shown bright in, you know. I can't make it to every community, you know what I mean? And others, you know, we don't live in, you know, we need people who are on the ground in different communities, man, to stand up and to be counted, you know. I was building with one of my brothers tonight, man, and he brought forth this saying, you know, instead of raging against the darkness, man, you know, light a candle, you know what I mean? Instead of raging against the darkness, light a candle. You know, make that your contribution. You know, the positive is always going to be powerful, more powerful than the negative. You know, what you are pro is always going to be more powerful than what you are anti. You know, it's easy to be anti. It takes much more ownership and responsibility to actually stand up and be pro. You know what I mean? So it's crazy, family, because, you know, what's bugged out is this ain't even really what I wanted to talk about tonight, man. I really wanted to talk about racial justice, you know what I mean? And so I had a lot of points here, so I don't even know, you know, if I'm going to get into that, man. I probably might just do a part 2 on that, you know. So what I'm going to do now, man, you know, this video, this is getting a little long, but I pray again. I pray that the words that I spoke tonight will find you and help to inspire you, you know, and challenge you, you know, to take positive ownership, you know, of your life, you know, so that you can contribute, you know, to this wake-up call, you know, to bring forth a new reality, you know, a new humanity, particularly for the Black family, you know, who have been knocked down and held down through ignorance, you know, through the sowing of inferiority or a belief in our inferiority in these neighborhoods, man. Like, yo, you can be a difference maker. And I pray that you choose to become one, you know. So now this fire department across the street from me, man, yo, they gonna mess up my video with they shining lights and they sirens, man. So I'm gonna take that as my cue to cut this short, man. And you know, I hope to build with you soon, family. So keep pushing, keep striving, you know what I mean?